May faith guide your every step. May truth and compassion be your eternal traveling companions, and may a deep, abiding spirit rest joyously in your every waking wish and your every resting dream. And now it's time for the chalice lighting. I invite you to join me in lighting our chalice. You can find the affirmation in our order of service. We light this chalice in the search for truth, the spirit of love. We unite for worship and fellowship. As an extension of lighting our chalice, I want to take a moment of silence to light 3 candles for some of the names of those who have recently been affected by police brutality. We cannot cover all the names of those affected. So this morning, we're going to light a candle for Jamarcus Brown, for the life of Lucius Barrows, and for the life of Miguel Godinez. As an extension of lighting our chalice, yes, we did that. May these lights be a symbol of our committee to continue the work of racial justice and to proclaim that Black lives matter. And now please join us in singing hymn 1008. When our heart is in a holy place, you'll find it in your teal hymnal.
Please rise. We will sing verses 1 and 3. Only 1 and 3.
So now is the time in our service for joys and sorrows. If you're visiting us for the first time, this is the time when you can introduce yourself. For those of you who are, we'll get to it. For those of you who are gathering in person, we invite you to raise your hand and then stand where you are seated. I will give you the microphone to share your joy or your sorrow, and we invite you to share what is in your heart. For those who are joining online, we invite you to type into the chat your joys and sorrows. Sally will read them aloud, and Sally will remind me to ask for that, yes. We invite you to share what is in your heart. Okay. I can get rid of that. Come around. Coming around.
Good morning. I have joy and sorrow. The joy is that my birthday was yesterday, and I'm 70 years old. I'm very proud of that. Like, I made it to be 70. It's very, very remarkable to me. And the sorrow is something that really pulled at my heart. This morning, the first news that feed on my Facebook, a good friend, a good person, a good activist in the community, Mary Bullock, died, and I couldn't believe it. She was such an activist in the community with so much energy, especially for Port Richmond fighting, Port Richmond. I just couldn't believe it. I'm still shocked.
Hi, good morning. I'm Chris. I think this is a joy, as we all know, that we have 2 St. Patrick's Day parades this year. One, I think, happens to be today. And we have one on March 17th, put together by the Forest Avenue Bid in support of being an inclusive St. Patrick's Day parade. So I just want folks to know I reached out to board, to exec, to membership, to worship guild, to community, just to say that I think that we should apply to march in this parade, and a couple of people were checking me on the shoulder about that too. So anyway, we did submit an application. The groups are going to be alerted if they've been approved. I would hope that we're going to be approved. I think they have to do this for logistic reasons, like how many people, blah, blah, blah. We should hear by March 8th. So stay tuned. We will certainly be announcing when we get approved, and we can proudly go down Forest Avenue with our fellow community people who believe in inclusion in a public event like the St. Patrick's Day Parade. So stay tuned, everybody, and I hope we have beautiful weather that day too, and we can all march proudly.
Coming around.
This is, I guess, a joy. Years ago, I had a conversation with Virginia, and I let her know that at one point in my youth, when I was a child, I was actually at Seaview. My brother and I were admitted because we had contracted scarlet fever, and we were in an institution at the time, so they couldn't keep us there, so they sent us to Seaview. And she talked about how she had worked there when it was a tuberculosis sanatorium. And I thought, oh, maybe you were one of the nurses that took care of us, because almost, I think, all the nurses at Seaview at the time were Black. But she said no, she had probably left before that time. But it just shows Staten Island was kind of a tiny place sometimes.
So I am very joyful in the fact that I've been able to spend some good time, a lot of time with my good friend Joyce. And we worked together a long time ago in child welfare and did a lot of the same kind of work. And it's just been heaven to be able to have her.
Thank you. Here you go.
Good morning, I'm Ryan. I have one sorrow that the roommate that I used to live in the building with, your building, you know, he passed away on Thursday night. And I know I'm okay. But the good side of all of it in the joy section, as Christine just said, we have one of the following St. Patrick's Day parade are inclusive that that everyone's gonna go to on Sunday, March 17th, which I'm happy for that and hope everybody can come to.
Thank you.
I also have a sorrow and a joy. The sorrow is that Carolyn is taking forever to recover from her chemotherapy. But the joy is that she's definitely getting better. It's just slow as all let out. Please keep her in your prayers and thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Randy, and my brother Eric, who attended the church here with me, the church school, had a little procedure and was overnight in the hospital. I picked him up yesterday from Langone Hospital. He's fine.
Hi, this is a message from Vicki for my sister Valerie, who actually got married in our church decades ago, just had knee surgery, hoping for the best for her and for Maureen, our member Maureen, who I know recently had similar surgery. And Mike says, I recall that from 1987 to 2000, I worked at Seaview as a paramedic with EMS and never knew anything about the Black Angels. I wish I had known about them then. And I have, my name is Sally, I have two things. David's brother, Tony, was hit by a car in around February 7th. Yeah, terrible broken leg, but the good news is they saved the leg, and he is in he's in Seaview. There's a theme here, and he's in rehab, and he gets wonderful visits from friends and keeps his spirits up. And the other thing, yesterday I marched, I went to the rally for ceasefire in Union Square, and on the way, there was a group of Staten Islanders who took the ferry, and I met a woman on the platform, I guess it was on the platform of the R, who was deaf. She's a Staten Islander. She goes to all of the ceasefire rallies, and she made the point that very few of them have interpretation for the deaf. And she brought that up to the organizers. I followed her the whole time until I got so wet and a little bit cold I had to go. But she marched on. Her name is Amal, and I hope I can stay in touch with her. She was really a remarkable woman, and we communicated. She can read lips, but I have to say, if you have a big mustache, like Peter McParland has, she could not read his lips. She was really remarkable.
Virginia, you wanted something. And Chris.
Good morning. My name's Virginia Allen, and I'm very happy to be here. I've been very busy running around signing books and making speeches about the book, and I'm very pleased with the book. It's very well written, and it tells the history of Staten Island. So I would suggest that everyone here gets a book and read it. You're going to enjoy it, and then pass it on. And I have to give kudos to Maria Smilios. She did a very good job of research. She's a real historian. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, yeah. Sorry, just tagging on to Kevin's message about Carolyn, and it certainly reminded me that Carolyn is a prolific Facebooker. And one great way to stay in touch with Carolyn is to like her on Facebook if you don't already. She usually posts memes of one kind or another, which are usually very entertaining, but it's a good way to stay connected with her. And of course, Ruth already talked about our own social media platforms. So just a hint that an easy way to stay in touch with Carolyn and wish her well is to like her on Facebook, and certainly like all her fun stuff that she puts out on Facebook. She is a prolific Facebooker and very entertaining.
To follow up with what Virginia had to say, the book club that I belong to at Toad Hill, we read the book, and I absolutely recommend it to anyone. As a native Staten Islander, I learned a lot that I didn't know, and for someone who isn't a native Staten Islander, it's a good way to get acquainted with the history of Staten Island that you're not going to learn anywhere else. And also, book signing-wise, there is a book signing by the author at the Toad Hill Library on Tuesday between 5 and 6. Thank you. The Toad Hill Library, it's on Victory Boulevard. Okay.
Thank you. Okay. You good? You good? Okay, I'm coming around. I'm getting my workout this morning. This is great.
Good morning, my name is Marge, and my sorrow was I had such a hard time getting here because of the St. Patrick's Day parade. I was ready to rip the green shirt off and stomp on it, but I didn't think that would be appropriate and start cursing on your way to church. That doesn't seem right. My joy is that this week I signed up at the YMCA, and when I walked into the front lobby, what do I see but a bigger than life-size poster of Ruth. Said, this must be a good place.
I will share this story of why my giant poster is in the lobby at the Y. Because the Y did a program, a promotional program last summer, and what they did is they went to every YMCA in the 5 boroughs, and each YMCA had a particular category of person, class, group, whatever, that they wanted a representative of in a photograph. And then, you know, these things we didn't even know what was going to happen with them. So the category for the Broadway YMCA was the older adult. That would be me. And I have a wonderful trainer named Kathy Morano, and if anybody follows coaching on Staten Island, you'll know Kathy. She's a star. So she put my name in, and sure enough, they sent the team, professional photographer, the assistant, the lights, the reflecting things. I mean, it was like I was a model. And we did the shoot last summer, and I wore my their first mistake was assuming I was just an old lady t-shirt. That's in the picture. And that was it. And we thought, oh, okay, well, we never heard anything. Nobody got back to us. And so, we just said, oh, well, that was fun, moving right along. And then about, I'm going to say, maybe just early in January, somebody sends me a picture. I snapped a picture of my poster and somebody else sort of slightly behind at the Javits Center. It's like, what? So it turns out that they're deploying these various posters all over the city. And so Kathy, my wonderful trainer, asked that they send my poster to our Y. Well, I said to her, oh my God, I will be mortified, do not do that. And she said, too late. And then I walked in, and there I was. I'm greeting me. So now, people come up to me and they say, are you the woman on the poster? I mean, I'm not quite signing autographs, but it's weird. Anyway, so that's the story of me on the, and I'm welcoming you to the Y, by the way. Yeah, it's life-size. It's almost larger than life, really, you know? It's very shocking, and it's very shocking to me because every time I go in to do my little workout, and that's the other thing I said, don't come looking at my workout, by the way, you know? Not very exciting. Yes, yes.
Maureen writes, I am recovering very well. This is, thanks for all the good wishes and love.
Everybody, okay. Whew. Thank you all for sharing your joys and sorrows, and for those held silently in your hearts. We'll now pause for meditation. I'll offer a quote to focus our meditation and then ring the chime. At that point, I invite you to begin the meditation with 3 deep breaths. After a few minutes, I will ring the bell again to mark the end of our time. Today's meditation prompt is by Ani Pema Chodron. Meditation practice isn't about trying to throw ourselves away and become something better. It's about befriending who we are. And now our guest speaker, Debbie-Ann Paige, is going to read us a poem from For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough.
Hi, good morning. If you'll indulge me for just a minute. Before I read just this small excerpt of the poem, I want to say that I first heard this poem and watched it when I was about 12 years old. Coming from a place that didn't really discuss issues with Black women, I was enthralled when I saw it on PBS. And so it comes from the play For Colored Girls. And I chose The Woman in Brown today because I think it speaks to my spirit this morning. So, dark phrases of womanhood, of never having been a girl, half notes scattered without rhythm, no tune, distraught laughter, falling over a Black girl's shoulder. Somebody, anybody, sing a Black girl song. Bring her out to know herself, to know you, but sing her rhythms, caring, struggle, hard times. Sing her song of life. She's been dead so long, closed in silence so long, she doesn't know the sound of her own voice, her infinite beauty. She's half notes scattered without rhythm, no tune. Sing her sighs, sing the song of her possibility, sing a righteous gospel. Let her be born and handled warmly. Thank you.
Now is the time in our order of service where we take an offering. We know it's the gifts of all of us that help support our ability to thrive and gather. For those attending in person, we will be passing around the collection plate. For those online, links and instructions will be posted in the chat. You can mail us a check or donate through our PayPal giving, through PayPal on the giving page on our website. Please give as generously as you can. Your offerings will be gratefully received. The offertory music, Be a Light by Franklin Willis.
Be the light, be the light. You and I must work together to be the light, be the light, be the light. You and I must work together to be the light. We must work together. You and I can be the light. We must work together. You and I can
Okay. The offertory hymn, please join us in singing hymn number 1024, When the Spirit Says Do, in your teal hymnal.
Please rise and notice the note at the bottom of the page. There's actually 6 verses, but there's only one word that changes for each of them.
Okay.
At the bottom. 1024. When the Spirit says do.
You gotta do when the Spirit says do. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you gotta do, oh Lord. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. Spirit says do, 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 Spirit says do. You gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. You gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. When the Spirit says sing, you gotta sing, oh Lord. You gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. Spirit says sing, 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 Spirit says sing. You gotta dance when the Spirit says dance. You gotta dance when the Spirit says dance. When the Spirit says dance, you gotta dance, oh Lord. You gotta dance when the Spirit says dance. Spirit says dance, 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 Spirit says dance. You gotta laugh when the Spirit says laugh. You gotta laugh when the Spirit says laugh. When the Spirit says laugh, you gotta laugh, oh Lord. You gotta laugh when the Spirit says laugh. Spirit says laugh, 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 Spirit says laugh. You gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. You gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. When the Spirit says shout, you gotta shout. You gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. Spirit says shout, 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 Spirit says shout. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you gotta do, oh Lord. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. Spirit says do, 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 Spirit says do. Spirit says
Okay. Now it gives me tremendous pleasure to welcome back our guest speaker, Debbie-Ann Paige. I'm going to just do the short intro because my printer wasn't working and I couldn't print out her big bio. Sorry. Debbie-Ann, professional historian and genealogist. There you go.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So good morning again, everyone. Thank you for having me back. I always appreciate being here. Always appreciate being here. Before I get started, I want to say I fell in love with this story and Miss Virginia Allen about 8 years ago at St. Andrew's Church. Can't hear me? Sorry. At St. Andrew's Church, when I first saw Maria Smilios give a presentation about a book that she had intended to write. and I offered my services, and I said, listen, what you need, you call me. And so we've been on this ride for 8 years. And as Virginia has said, the book is great. The book is absolutely wonderful. It tells a story that we hadn't heard before. But there's one thing that I realized as I was listening to the stories, because some of the things I was misinformed about as well. And so we had to dig and look. One of the things that stood out was that we weren't talking about the women in the community. We talked about them being in the hospital, in the sanatorium, taking care of patients, the things that they had to endure as they were in that space. And I thought, well, they were mothers, aunties, cousins. What did they do? And so I embarked on a series of research processes, and we're going to have an essay, a catalog essay that will be put out with the Staten Island Museum, hopefully within a few months. And this, what I'm giving you today, will be a part of that catalog essay. So, when I was here last month, I told you all the story about the Great Migration and the waves that it made, to Staten Island. It was mostly about the country's most well-known and influential African newspapers steering the newcomers upstate New York and Staten Island. And so this month, as we celebrate women, I'd like to celebrate the Black women of that Great Migration who worked at Seaview and trained as practical nurses, trained nurses, and other ancillary roles. So let me set the stage. For me, October 1929, the stock market has just crashed. The country is thrown into economic panic. Unemployment for African Americans has skyrocketed to upwards of 50%. The ensuing Great Depression has deepened the existing economic and social inequalities that have plagued the Black community here on Staten Island as well. It pushed many Black families further into poverty, limited access to health care and resources, and created a struggle just for basic survival. In 1929, in New York, tuberculosis continued to ravage the bodies and the lives of the city. It didn't care that the stock market had just crashed. The disease didn't care about race or immigrant status. The disease didn't care that poverty was on the rise and that the African American access to the healthcare had been further exacerbated. It also didn't care that during this era of Great Migration, as we now call it, we experienced a heightened nursing shortage to the point of crisis. The disease just didn't care. But New York City officials did. And these officials were prompted to initiate an extensive recruitment campaign targeting Black nurses residing in the south and west of New York City. They targeted them to fill the gap of available trained nurses. And the influx of these women into the city, particularly into Staten Island, resulted in a marked change in the racial landscape of the borough. And with that change, the way the Black community functioned. For those of you who are not quite familiar with the Seaview Hospital and Sanatorium of the 1930s through the 1960s, I'll say this. It was constructed between 1905 and 1938, roughly. It was the largest, most expansive municipal facility dedicated to treating tuberculosis in the nation at the time. This reflected the urgency of addressing the TB epidemic that was rampant in the early 20th century, especially among the city's impoverished and immigrant populations who were more susceptible due to crowded living conditions. In Maria's book, The Black Angels, the untold story of the nurses who helped cure tuberculosis, it focused our attention on the women like Virginia Allen and Virginia's Aunt Edna, Curleen Jennings, Missouri Meadows. And those extraordinary stories that these women provided gave us a glimpse into the sometimes appalling conditions of work, the triumphs and setbacks of working with TB patients, and their vital role in finding the cure for tuberculosis. By 1939, there were more than 600 nurses working at Seaview, and 2/3 of them were African American. So at this juncture, I'm going to redirect us to focus your attention on the humanity of these extraordinary women. These nurses who migrated from the southern states and the Caribbean to Staten Island, following the nearly 6 million others across the country between 1910 and 1970, formed blended families as a natural outgrowth of the Great Migration. Cultures commingled, and the community filled with the second generation of Southern, Midwestern, Western, and Caribbean families, excuse me, that spread across the island. This movement brought together people of the African diaspora to create and cultivate a sense of support within the community. These women were caretakers of TB patients at Seaview and caretakers of the community when they returned home. These nurses of African descent did not find Staten Island to be particularly welcoming when they got here. They left Jim Crow South to meet his cousin, Jim Crow North, when they got to these shores. As a result, the mass migration of African descended peoples to Staten Island has experienced a steady rise in numerous social and civic groups dedicated to improving the Black community, with these many initiatives led by the African American nurses who were working at Seaview. Community engagement was one of the first things that the nurses would have done as they arrived on the island. They would have sought out a church to ground their faith. They praised God in the pulpits while serving as in the nurses' guilds and the missionary communities. They were involved in African-centered churches such as Stapleton UAME or Shiloh AME Zion. Excuse me. However, they also worshiped in churches in the local neighboring white communities, and they worshiped as Methodists, Presbyterians, and Roman Catholics. Others would have looked for social and civic organizations like the Women's Civic and Political Union, founded to educate Black women on voting rights in 1919, or established organizations such as Lambda Kappa Mu sorority, a business and professional sorority, to provide a space where they, as professional women of color on Staten Island, could connect and support one another. When the nurses observed a lack of assistance or felt unwelcomed by other organizations, they took matters into their own hands and established their own groups to tackle the problems of the community. They organized mutual aid societies, they discussed politics, they used this space to mobilize for the community, using the history of their collective past to inform the work that they were doing. Still, others joined political organizations like the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, the Staten Island League for Better Government, and the National Council of Negro Women, Staten Island section, to exercise their political rights. When the women of the African diaspora, regardless of their geographic location, established clubs and organizations and assumed leadership positions within them, they did so to raise funds for the establishment and maintenance of the hospitals and the training schools and the community that surrounded them. Black women found it crucial to actively engage in the community as they navigated social, civic, and political spaces. Upon arrival in their new community, many quickly became integrated into the fabric of social life. They participated in the fundraising activities. As club women, they supported their civic and social groups, and they unwound sometimes with a few card games. They would sit and play bridge together in each other's homes while they talked and decompressed. They bought homes, mostly in the West Brighton community, but all over the island, and established what became known as Dog Patch, that kind of ran around where Bradley and Wheeler Avenues were. This began the serious business of wealth building for their families and for the community. Excuse me. But in living in these communities, sometimes they struggled to be neighborly. While at work, the nurses didn't view the Seaview campus solely as a gloomy place that was filled with tuberculosis patients. They found ways to lighten the mood and take care of themselves. I found an article that in the fall of 1939, the New York Age, which was a leading Black-run newspaper, reported that the nurses created the Seaview Nurses Library Committee. The purpose of the committee was to plan and arrange public programs like concerts, to raise funds to expand the literary materials of the library that was used by the nurses to entertain themselves. They held benefits to support each other by raising money through an annual benefit-style show and dance. For example, in December of 1939, as I said, when there were more than 600 nurses employed at Seaview and 2/3 of them were African American, the monies that were raised that December was to bring cheer to the sick and needy nurses who weren't able to help themselves. So 4 months later, in April 1940, the Seaview nurses carefully planned yet another benefit. This time they intended to use those funds directly to buy more books for the library. The New York Age reported it this way. On last Thursday evening, a fair-sized audience filled the spacious auditorium of the nurses' home of Seaview Hospital in Staten Island to hear a concert sponsored by the Seaview Nurses Library Committee. That article went on to laud two young ladies whose merit recommending for their untiring effort in presenting this affair, Rachel and Ruby McCullough. The concert goers listened to piano solos and duets, dramatic readings, singing solos and singing duets, and these were presented by the nurses themselves to showcase their own talents. The nurses formed relationships and friendships outside of the hospital and outside of Staten Island. So they invited in well-known musicians to sing selections like "I Dream of Jeannie with the Light Brown Hair," or "Every Time I Feel the Spirit," or "Ave Maria," which I'm not going to attempt. At the end of the concert, the nurses invited the audience in to inspect the neatly furnished library and see the cataloged collection of the books that they had been buying and what their money would go towards helping to uplift. After the clinical trials of the groundbreaking drug ionized began and the need for nurses at Seaview started to dwindle, many of the nurses moved on to local public health hospitals like Fox Hills or Halloran, or they changed careers entirely and became school teachers, among other professions. Nurses like Irma Beck left her position as the chief nurse at Seaview in 1951 to join the ranks of the Army Nurse Corps as a commissioned officer at the rank of captain. The Black women leaders in the churches and organizations on Staten Island remained open to Black women who continued to migrate to the area. They remained friends and confidants of other women in their circles. Teachers and nurses worked together for the community, but they also gave themselves space and grace. You can often find social news and reports about these bridge players or sponsorships of cotillions. The nurses and their families became the Black middle class, and with that, accepted the responsibility for uplifting their community. They engaged in this respectability politics to demonstrate to the world and provide a blueprint of a way forward as a community. The idea of self-care for caregivers is not a new concept to Black women. They practiced this crucial remedy for mental health in the early years of the 20th century, but they did it in the tradition of their mothers and their African ancestors. The Black nurses at Seaview were at the forefront in finding the cure for tuberculosis, while fighting for civil rights and social justice. They embraced and comforted their families, pushing aside the worries of the dangerous illness creeping into their homes. They shared laughter, they shared meals, they shared festivities within their close-knit groups. They infused the Staten Island community within a vibrant energy whenever they were around. These women embodied strength, compassion, kindness, resilience, firmness, and countless other qualities that I cannot fully capture their significance in what they actually mean to Staten Island and our community. Thank you.
And now for the closing hymn. Please join us in singing hymn 1028, Fire of Commitment, in your teal hymnal. I invite you to join me in extinguishing our chalice. You can find the affirmation in the order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of the truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. For these we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Closing words. As you prepare to leave this sacred space, by Andrew Pikula. As you prepare to leave this sacred space, pack away a piece of this church in your heart. Wrap it carefully like a precious gem. Carry it with you through the joys and sorrows of your days. Let its gentle glow strengthen you, warm you, remind you of all that is good and true, until you gather here again in this place of love. And so ends our service. Please